Hi everybody, we are back to take a look at the second resource. So I chose a PowerPoint. And I will be honest, I don't do a whole lot of PowerPoints. I think this is one of only two that my students see, just because of how the modeling approach works. We don't do a whole lot of PowerPoint notes. It's more so all based on discovery through lab-based settings, and then the students whiteboard their answers, and then I just kind of come together after they've had big discussions and just make everything a little bit clearer. But our notes only end up being about a page or two, and that's with examples included. But energy is a little bit different. There's a lot going on in energy. So to do just the one visual of the big picture notes after the whiteboarding and discovery lab just don't really cut it, since we do have to talk about so much. So a little bit of background before a student would see this PowerPoint. We first have kind of a pre-assessment lab that looks at forces, energy, and momentum. And they go through a couple of different stations where they're watching videos, they're looking at some demonstrations that I do, and they do a couple like small hands-on activities themselves, and they do a write-up about what did they view, why did they think that, and then I can get some information from there. Part two then is them doing a discovery lab that looks at potential energy and kinetic energy. And then we do that big picture, which is actually not that big, because we don't get as much as we'd like from that discovery lab, which is why now we have kind of the last stage of the initial notes, which is using this PowerPoint. So taking a look at our couple different resources, I will say I was kind of torn going back and forth between, is this PowerPoint okay? Is it not? Because pretty much leading up to this class, everything that I was told about good PowerPoints is that they should have minimal information. They should have just enough that if you glance at it, you know what's going on. But really, you should be discussing, and that should just be a visual tool. So if we're thinking about differentiation for all learners, if they only had this, and they only had like the little bit and minimal information on the PowerPoint, they're really not going to see the whole picture, which is where I think this by itself fails. What I can do to kind of combat though is record the lesson, which again, thinking in terms of UDL, yes, I'm thinking for one student, if they are visually impaired, and they would prefer to hear it, which again, that's where more of the information is going to come from, is from my explanation as to how kinematics and forces come together. Yes, it's going to be good for a specific student I'm thinking about, but in all reality, that's honestly good for everybody. It's good for the students who are sitting in class, because let's be honest, there's sometimes that we lose focus, and they'll be able to come back and rewatch that portion that maybe they kind of spaced out for a minute or two. They can rewatch that and say, oh, that's where she got that from. Or if a student's absent, then they've seen the lesson. And I think there are ways that I could differentiate this better, and I think that would be one of those ways. Okay, so looking at the accessibility of the PowerPoint, once again, I pretty much went with the black and white theme. Oh, sorry about that. Which isn't utilizing color to the best of the ability. This is a giant chart that's pretty much just black and white. And I'm also not utilizing images as well as I could be. Kind of the same thing with the other document, here, potential energy, here's just a ball on the hill. There are better images that I can put than just here. Let's pretend that this actually shows potential energy. It's a good image to discuss and say, okay, yes, that ball is on the top of the hill. When it rolls down, what can it do? And we can go into a discussion. But in terms of a pure visual, that's not great. Same thing with what I have here, it's very kind of jumbled together. Even me looking at it right now, it just kind of, it looks like a lot and can be overwhelming and not always make sense. But what I wanted to look at was actually this slide. So if we look at conservative versus non-conservative forces, The video that was posted for us to watch was only about 4 minutes. I found kind of enlightening because I wasn't, first of all, expecting the professor who had recorded it to be using the recording device. And it was really interesting to hear how it would be read because, yes, we think, okay, we're going to read from left to right. But in terms of this table, I need to read down and then go down on the other side. But if this was one of the recording, I'm sorry, the speaking devices, it's going to read conservative forces, non-conservative forces, gravitational force, friction, spring force, air resistance, and it's just going to seem like a whole jumble of words that's really not going to make any sense. So really what I should have done with this slide, kind of thinking about that, is put it, okay, conservative forces, then here's what they could be going left to right. Non-conservative forces underneath going left to right. So someone who would need that resource, or I'm sorry, who would need that tool, that's going to work a lot better for them. And that video did, at least for me, really highlighted what a student would hear and is it going to always make sense? And in this slide, the answer is no. Which really, if they didn't understand the difference between, okay, this is a conservative or non-conservative, it becomes a real problem when we start to look at things like work that only care about non-conservative forces. So they could be all messed up if they don't know the difference between conservative and non-conservative, and that really would be on me. Another item at the very end of this document, I do show a video. Oh, I guess, oh, there we go. Okay. So why didn't this work correctly? So we do watch a quick video about kind of a fail using uh, conservation of energy, and if you bring a bowling ball to your face, what is it going to do? And it didn't work as they thought they should, and it's kind of a good talking point as to why didn't it work. But in terms of links, I could put a hyperlink here instead. Instead of just writing that whole thing out, I could put in the hyperlink, which would at least then maybe, give a title to what is this link that you're clicking on rather than just like, here's a whole bunch of word jumbled together. So I think that would be helpful to put the link. As far as tables, I only had the one, so which was up here, which we've already kind of talked about how I can work on that. And the color scheme, as we see going through, pretty much everything is just black and white. And I do think it would be helpful to have that sufficient color contrast that our document talks about, because right now I really don't have it. So that would be helpful. Also, I didn't realize that there were different views that we could go into, and that outline view is most helpful to students. Which this is really neat. I honestly didn't realize that we could do this, and it's a helpful tool to really see, how is this PowerPoint progressing, and what are kind of the key points that we're taking from this. And I just found this to be really interesting, very helpful, and something to keep in mind in the future for both myself as I'm doing this outline and for students as to see, okay, well, what are they really going to see if we were just to look at this? So that kind of sums up some of the things with the accessibility PowerPoint. Um, there are definitely ways that this could be enhanced, and I think a lot of them deal with more so my visuals that I use and that auditory part. My video could be embedded better, and I could also record this so that it would help all learners. As I said in the last video, I do think I kind of failed in terms of differentiation and in terms of my visual here, and I honestly believe that I have to take a hard look at some of these, and I am going to do that. But that's kind of my wrap up. I would love if people could give me some feedback. I know this needs work, so I pretty much will accept anything that you have to send to me, and I thank you for your time and for your feedback.